So let's talk about these ancient cultures and this finance, okay? Because I think it's a really important topic that is kind of overlooked. We kind of assume that money and finance is something that we invented in this modern era. Now, I know that we know that there's old coins and things like that going back to the Roman era and so forth, but I mean, I'm talking about thousands of years before that. There were already economic systems in existence, finance and money in existence, loans in existence. Okay. And so, the ancient finance is basically the root of all global economic systems. It's like a tree with roots, and those roots have spread and gone deep into civilization over many eons and influence us till this very day. Okay. If you talk about, first looking at the Sumerians, the ancient Sumerians coming out of Mesopotamia, where you have the Tigris and Euphrates River, you have you have Turkey, which is part of ancient Mesopotamia, Iraq, Iran, all those places out in and out through there, all part of ancient Mesopotamia. They actually developed a currency system. And the first currency system that they created was barter and trade. Okay. Barter and trade was their very first created currency system. And some of you may have heard me talk about this before, where if you get a book called The Gods of Eden by William Bramley, and I've been trying to catch up with this gentleman for some time. I got to get him on my podcast. The book is just phenomenal. He goes deep into the tablets and shows the evidence of this barter and trade system, but not only the barter and trade system, also how it relates to creating inflation in ancient times. So if I had a farm and I had wheat and you had lamb, right? And I wanted to go get some lamb, I would come and bring you 2 satchels of wheat and you would give me a lamb and we call it even. Okay, barter and trade. Now, let's say there's a religious holiday coming and everybody's making a run on the meat man for the lamb. So you come over with the 2 satchels of wheat. He doesn't have the lamb, a full lamb available for you because of supply and demand. He can only produce so many lambs. So now you get a half of a lamb. He cuts it in half, gives you half. You still give him the 2 things of wheat. Now, he's going to give you a stone tablet. And on this stone tablet, it's going to be an IOU, a receipt that says, you gave me 2 satchels for a half. You have credit now to come back and get the other half when it's back in stock. You leave, you cook your lamb, you do whatever you do, you celebrate. You go, I really need to go back and get that other half of lamb now. So you go back with your little stone tablet receipt, and he goes, man, I'm sorry, but there's still been a heavy run on lamb. I can't give you a half. That tablet is now only worth a second quarter. So now you've got basically, 2/3 of a lamb. So you get your quarter and you leave, and now that's it. You're done. Inflation happened just like that right before our very eyes. The creation of inflation, the supply and demand concept, and it was done in ancient times. And how do we know this? Well, we know because we have the tablets. We have the receipts. We have hundreds and hundreds of stone tablet IOUs. We have a record and an account of all these transactions happening. They would trade goods like grain, livestock, tools. Those are the things that they would barter and trade for in exchange for the things that they needed from the other person. But there were times where things were in shortage, and because of the shortage, the value had gone basically down. Okay, and the value of your work had gone down, which means that whatever you're trading, the value has been decreasing. It is the beginning of inflation, which is just bananas to understand that this happened thousands and thousands of years ago, 6, 7, 8,000 years ago. Inflation was just beginning for us. And we're still stuck in inflation till this very, very day. It's just eye-opening to see that it isn't a modern problem. It's an ancient problem that made its way into modern times. Okay. let me see if I can find a tablet real quick and pull something up on the screen for you guys. One of these receipts. Let me find a receipt and pull it up. Oh, here's one. Hold on a second. Let me pull this up for you guys. This is pretty cool stuff. You know, people aren't talking about this kind of stuff often because, you know, it's not known that much, and you got to do a lot of digging and research to find this information out, but I don't mind. Let me share my screen and pull this one up here. Okay. Let's see. No, that's not it. Here we go. Boom. Okay. There you go. This is a cuneiform tablet with receipt for grain and envelope. So not only do you get the receipt, you also get an envelope to put your stone cuneiform tablet inside of as you walk away. Okay, so it doesn't rip open your pocket, I guess, but you get that. This is Detroit Institute of Arts. Okay, this is a collection they have of the cuneiform tablets, and this is one of the receipts that they have, and it's on file there. Okay, it's available to actually view and see. And it's a cuneiform tablet with receipt for grain and envelope, circa 2050 BCE. We're talking over 4,000 years ago. Okay, over 4,000 years ago, we see this receipt. You can see the size in inches there. Okay, it's just incredible to see this. But we have hundreds of these. And again, proving the understanding of this receipt system, this barter and trade system, what they were trading, and also IOUs have been recorded as well. Okay, just some pretty incredible stuff. Let me get back. Where was I? Oh, here we go. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen. Yeah, so pretty cool, right? So let's get back to it. So that's just the beginning of kind of the end for the dollar. As time goes on, it seems like no matter what money system we're involved in, there seems to be this devaluation of money just based on whatever things happen, whether it's supply and demand, whether it's economic oppression, whether it's the oligarchs circulating too much money, various different reasons, but it always seems to be an issue no matter what culture you look at. And then also the Sumerians started implementing silver as proto money. Okay, they were called shekels. So this silver is just like, it's not minted. There's no minting at all. It's just like slivers of silver, just slivers of silver, you know, irregular shapes, you know, not perfectly round or anything like that, but just thin slivers of the silver, and the weight would determine how much value those shekels were. Okay, and so by doing that, you know, they were able to determine how much money you had, how much value that silver had. And it wasn't minted, but it was weighed. Okay, and it was like one of the strongest forms of having wealth, known forms of having wealth in those times. Having bags and bags of shekels, you meant you were fairly doing well. You were probably rich. Okay. Now, where did these churches start collecting all these tithes and offerings? Well, in ancient times, the temples were the banks. They're still the banks, except you deposit money there, but you never get it back. So these temples were banks back in the day, okay? And the temples were literally financial hubs, and they were not only for storing money that was given to them like shekels or other forms of revenue, but also storing grain, storing silver, storing you know, all the recorded transactions of the day, of the week, of the month, and even of the year. And so it was a place to do literal and actual banking. So now, obviously, prior to them being used for banking, these temples served more significant purposes within the ancient Anunnaki pantheon and the ancients, the people of the ancient times, and what their purpose and focus was for the harnessing of the energy of those temples, the star alignments, and everything else that the temple really had to offer now had been forgotten, still in ancient times, still in deep antiquity. But, you know, what they were using it for 6, 7, 8,000 years ago, banking. They said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and turn this thing into a bank. Keep the party jumping. Okay, so they started turning temples into banks, and they were the main hubs for finance. But we take you to these ancient temples where we show you the storehouses for the grain, the silver, the meat, and so we show you how they had these hidden chambers and areas where they would hide it. We show you how the people were in the hieroglyphs, how the people would line up for sometimes miles to come and honor the gods, to bring their offerings. And we also talk about how the fact that, the priests of the temple were really laughing inside because this food and these offerings and this money was going straight to them. They even have an area under some of the temples that I'll show you where they would have a priest hiding inside of a secret section. And they had set the stones up in such a way that when he bellows and speaks from there, it makes this godly tone ring throughout vibrate throughout the temple. So he would pretend as if he was a god speaking to the humans, and he would make these decrees and tell these people to do this and do that and give more and bring more. And they thought that it was God literally talking to them. I mean, this is how we were back then. We literally were so gullible, we fall for anything. And the people with the knowledge, they always prospered. And who prospered the most? The priests. Who prospered the most in these times and days? The priest. It hasn't changed. They're still using temples as banks to this day, and they're still pimping the people's brains till this very day. Nothing's changed. And they're milking them like they milk a cow. I know you saw that video recently where Marvin Sapp he shut the church down. He said, close the doors, close the doors, close the doors. Don't let anybody out of here. Everybody in this place is going to give me $20. You ain't going nowhere. And whoever's ever on stage with me, y'all going to give me $100 each. We're going to get $40,000 right now. Same thing as the ancients. Nothing has changed. Not one thing. Okay. So this is a quittance tablet. Was a quittance for an actual loan in silver. So this person was loaned money in silver, and they paid this loan back until it was paid off. Okay. And this is from the ancient city of Kanesh, which is part of a network of trading settlements established in central Anatolia by merchants of Ashur, which is in Assyria, which is northern Mesopotamia in those times. Okay. In the early second millennium BC, traveling long distances and often living separately from their families, these merchants traded vast quantities of goods, primarily tin and textiles. So this is pretty crazy. This is incredible. We see this loan and this loan acquittance. These people would get loans and funds, and then they would actually literally pay back these loans. And here's the paid off statement. So they have a monthly statement. They have this paid off statement showing that they fulfilled their obligation. Which is pretty cool. All right. So this is just showing you that the people of the ancient past, when they start saying things and leaving information behind, and they're talking about technology, they're talking about incredible stories of people who came here from other places and so forth. And then we just like sweep it under the rug. Oh, these people didn't know what they were talking about, but they have these sophisticated economic systems which have influenced us till this very day. So at some point we have to begin to listen to what they're talking about. We have to listen to what they're talking about. Let's get into talking about some of the financial practices of these ancient Sumerians. We know they had loans, but they didn't just have loans. They had loans with interest. So they understood the concept of interest rates. Now, that means that somebody at some governmental level actually established the rate. So they had like a Fed back then to establish these rates. So they would do loans of silver or grain, and they had standardized rates. They had things like 20% per annum for silver and so forth. So they had these rates already built and locked in. They had debt slavery. So if debts weren't repaid, individuals will become indentured slaves. So you can't pay somebody back. Well, you got to go get your cleaning britches and go over to their property, and you'll work for them until they feel the debt's paid off by your own personal labor. Okay. And sometimes, just sometimes, they'll make you forfeit your property, or if you owe them enough, they'll take your loved ones. So they can take actual people can be taken away from you. They might take your wife or your daughter or something like that. Okay, so you got, you had to be careful back then. If you took a loan out, you better pay it back, or you can lose everything. Okay, in Mesopotamia. So that's pretty crazy. They also had taxes. Taxes 7,000-8,000 years ago. Who would have thought that? I mean, just crazy. They had state taxed on collected goods and labor instead of money. And then, of course, they had credit and lending. So they had the concept of borrowing and interest, and then they also have this lending system. So they understood lending and banking, and credit card companies have taken some of the aspects of these ancient Sumerians' culture and finance system and implemented it onto us today. So Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and so forth, they're mimicking or copying an ancient system that already existed. Okay, that's how they did it. And they also had pretty good financial record keeping. We know this because we have all the cuneiform tablets. We have balance sheets. We have profit and loss statements. Yes, profit and loss. They have P&Ls and balance sheets 8,000 years ago. Crazy. And we have these at actual museums, all in cuneiform. Okay. And then we can move on over to the people of ancient Egypt, the people of ancient Kemet, Northern Africa. Yes, Egypt and Kemet, same place. And also location of that place is Africa. Okay, so Egypt is not in the Middle East, contrary to popular belief by a lot of people. Egypt, again, is not in the Middle East. It is a country in Africa, just so you can know. I mean, people come up to me all the time and they make the mistake of talking about, they want to get to the Middle East. They want to go visit the Middle East with me. And I go, well, where are we going in the Middle East? I'm not going to the Middle East. They go, well, I thought you go to Egypt every year. I said, yeah, I go to Egypt, but that's in Africa. So I'm starting to clear that up. Okay. Egypt is in Africa. Africa is a continent that has a lot of countries in it. So these countries exist within the continent of Africa. Okay. Just to make sure everybody understands. Now, what did they have? They had a currency system. They had grain as currency. They had barley and wheat were used as fixed quantities of units of exchange. So you would have these little tiny satchels, little tiny ones, and they'd have wheat and they'd have barley in them. And depending on how many of those bags you had, you can add up. They had value. The more you had, the more value they had. Okay. They have different sizes. It's almost like, somebody packaging up, something they're going to sell on the street corners. But this was barley and wheat. And it had value. So that's what they would walk around with. And that's what they would use for trade. Okay. They also had Debens. Okay. Weight of metal. They had copper, silver, and gold, which were used, and it was based on weight. One Deben was 91 grams. Okay. So one Deben, D-E-B-N, was 91 grams. And so this metal was either gold, it was silver, or copper. And why gold, silver, or copper? Well, those are metals that have value because they can be utilized to do something. They weren't taking that gold, metal, and silver just to make decorations and jewelry. They're going to take that gold, metal, and silver, and in some way, some of it was going to work its way into technology. Okay, various different types of technologies, and technology doesn't mean it's a microchip. Technology is anything, right? Engineer it into anything that can be useful to be used as a tool is a form of engineering and technology. And so a lot of tools and a lot of engineering, no matter how ancient, require different types of metals. And so those metals would have a great amount of value. And that's why they use those metals, okay? They never really had coins until the late period. So late into the newer dynastic era is when actual coins started coming out. But they used, the ancient money system, which was really a lot of the grains. The grains and the metals were the true trade of the ancient Egyptians. They did have a centralized economy, and the pharaoh was seen as like a divine king of all the land. and he had a lot of grain silos. Silo, the TV series Silo. He had grain silos and granaries, and all the labor was managed by the state. So you were paid for your labor, though. You weren't a slave. There were no slaves building pyramids and working in these granaries. These were people that were managed by the state and getting paid. Workers were paid in rations, okay? Laborers, including pyramid builders, were all paid in beer, bread, and onions. So that's how they were paid, okay? Beer, bread, and onions were their salary. And we know this because we have an account of this. Remember, they didn't actually have physical money in this place. And they did have tax collectors, though. So they tracked everything. They tracked crops, livestock, labor output, and they also used hieroglyphic and heretic script to track everything and write down and log everything. So they had all of this, erratic script, I'm sorry. They had all this stuff logged and tracked for every farmer and every landowner. And they knew, okay, when it's tax time, you need to give us X amount of wheat and X amount of grain, X amount of this. So they would go around and collect this, right? That's how you paid your taxes. And, they had, like I said, they had the granaries. Grain could be borrowed and traded or taxed. So you can actually, at that time, you can use grain. You can actually use your grain to loan somebody the grain, and they can pay you back with more grain, like interest. So your grain had value to where it could even be loaned out. Okay, which is pretty crazy that you could. I mean, they must have really needed that damn grain. They had accounting, so they had detailed records kept on papyrus, and we know because we have a copy of these papyrus, and the papyrus are actually stored in museums and so forth. So we have the papyrus, and they were the precursor to accounting and CPA work. Accounting and CPA work and techniques all come from these ancient papyruses from the ancient Egyptians. Okay, that's where they actually originate. So it's pretty cool because they had the centralized management. They had command of their economy because they had really inspired these control systems that had everybody accountable for everything that they did when it came to trade, barter, and what they were living on, what they were growing, how much produce or crops they had, how much livestock they had, was all calculated and controlled by the government, pretty much. So it's pretty cool that, the ancient Egyptians had that system, and it really helped shape modern finance. All these things help shape everything that we're going through today. Silver, shekels, and Debens. If you want to look at that in ancient cultures, right? That's going to translate into precious metal monetary systems and early coins, and the modern equivalent of that. If you look at the temple and palace treasuries, or temples being used as banks, today we have what? We have banks, and we have the central banks that are doing and operating pretty much the same exact way, just using digital currency and what we call fiat currency. We have the grain-based economy in ancient times, which gives you the commodity markets and the agricultural subsidies of today. No difference. The same, absolutely the same. And we have the clay papyrus ledgers from ancient times to catalog information. And today we have double entry bookkeeping and accounting software like QuickBooks, right? So we have QuickBooks now, but back then they had papyrus ledgers. No difference. Back then they had loans with interest, and today we have credit markets, mortgages, and bonds. Okay. They had state administered wealth, and today we have central taxation, and we have fiscal policy. And of course, they had labor-based payment, and today we have salaries, wages, and payment systems. So what they did back then, thousands of years ago, has had a significant impact on us, because those systems that they implemented back then, that financial matrix, has passed through time and made it all the way up many eons later into this current era. And we're still operating underneath that system till this very, very day. Pretty crazy, huh? Pretty crazy. And I mean, wow, just to be able to see that these people had such a wealth of knowledge about managing economics and finance, it lets us know that, well, these people from that time, they weren't that stupid. Now they were gullible. They were gullible about this God stuff and these people who masqueraded as gods, but they weren't stupid when it came to basic logic and things like finance and farming and economics and civilizations, being built and structures and cities and everything else. They had a lot of knowledge when it came to that. They just happened to be gullible when it came to spiritual concepts. But that's okay. That's neither here or there. People are still gullible when it comes to that till this very day. So that hasn't even changed. That hasn't even changed. Just it's such human nature. But otherwise, other than that, you see people were very intelligent and they set up very sophisticated, intricate systems that can be tracked and that stood the test of time from then when they created it till this very day.